Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 145 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Okay, I'm roughing out these feathers along the edge of this wing on this die. And I think I showed it before. I want to show it again to make sure that people understand. And I hope it doesn't pecker up my camera a whole bunch with stuff coming off. I talk about having a 9-point, and the way it works is it dances and it runs really fast. That's the benefit of these 1/2-inch square 9-points, because the 5/8 points don't spin as well, and so they don't work as effectively to take off stone when they're in here bouncing around. They're just slow and they work, but not as well. And you can get the 5/8, it seems. You can get bigger ones. It's hard to get the 1/2-inch. I end up making them. Not everybody has them. But when you're doing that, you're not holding this tool as it runs. You're not holding this like you do a chisel. All you're doing is controlling it. You sort of corral it. And when you're in like this, you're just working. You're basically pushing back against the tool with your forward hand. You're holding back to keep it at a steady level. And this backhand, it's locked between these, so there's enough room for this tool to hit and bounce. And as soon as you want to stop cutting, you have to lift the tool away from the stone, the hand machine away from the stone, and at the same time, you have to come with this hand, you have to capture the 9-point, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it here for a second, see if I can show you that close up, because that's how these actually work. And if you don't do it that way, you're not going to cut very effectively, okay? Okay, that's with a 1-inch hand machine, okay, a full stroke 1-inch hand machine. And if you don't have a big enough compressor, well, let me just show you. If you don't have a big enough compressor that pushes enough CFM, cubic feet per minute, I'm not talking about the size of it, it doesn't have enough capacity. Like, you'll either be able to go like that for just a couple minutes, or your hand machine only goes like this. It won't go like this. That's part of why you have to have a big compressor. When I say big, I mean you have to have a compressor that produces enough air that'll actually drive your machine and cut stone, okay? So I'm gonna just go ahead and keep working on this, and we'll pop back in here in a little bit. But you can use a smaller hand machine, a 3/4-inch hand machine. It won't use quite as much air, but if your 9-point won't run that fast, it's gonna take forever to push stone off like this. And it'll be a lot different carving experience, and you've got to be able to capture that 9-point as soon as you lift your hand machine away from the stone and grab it, because you don't need to be holding it. There'll be some times when you'll hold it a little bit or you'll corral it, but as soon as you take the tension off with that hand machine, you have to grab it, or the thing will just go, shoot across, and it'll hit whatever it hits and break whatever is breakable that it hits. All right, back to cut. While we're right here in the same spot, I just reworked this ripper just a little bit to move these points close, these tips closer together. And sharp matters, but I bet I moved each one of these points a 1/16 of an inch closer to the center. They were still pretty spread out, and I finally got down to where I could push it over, and I've got them probably a 1/16 of an inch apart, closer. So at this point, let's look on our high-tech ruler. At this point, they're exactly a 1/4 inch between tops. And before, they were probably, I bet they're almost 3/8. Look at the difference of the way this cuts. That slot isn't quite a 1/4 inch deep, but it's 3/16. That's how fast a ripper will open this up. It used to be really common. I don't know, I'll have to pull out my grandfather's tool chest at some point. I think he's got a few of them in there. You'd get these big rippers for running them in a bumper, or like my big hand drill, and it's the whole face of the ripper is probably an inch wide and probably 2 inches long or something like that. And you do that to rip a stone, to rip in lines, to break stuff out, because they didn't have diamond saws. It was back before the technology existed. So you relied heavily on rippers. They were tool steel, and they'd run those things, and you do all that to pull the face off the stone so you could run it down and surface it, finish it, to get a square face on it, flat face. So get your rippers tuned up right, and they'll cut really, really well. Important before I put my mask back on. As I'm working this here, I'm still not working towards the edge. This is the flat side that I axed. We don't want to push out this way, because this will fracture. You can push. If you haven't done it before, you start leaning on this and check a line, it'll blow your mind how big a piece of stone you can take off here very easily. If we put a handset on here and smooth this up a little bit. I bet if I put a handset where I've got some flat spots in here, I could break almost halfway to the back of this stone easily. Blow this whole side right off. This will fracture, so you have to make sure you work your energy into the central mass and not out towards extremities. You don't want to stress it. Okay? Put my mask on and go to work. wanted to make sure to get some video of how I'm using this hand machine. I want to move the camera down just a little bit. That's better. This is rough out work, okay? This is the hardest stuff you're going to do with these tools. You know, this is where you got to have the muscle and you got to have the guns, or whatever. Okay, I'm not squeezing this tool like Superman, and I'm not squeezing this chisel like Superman. Did you see that? Doing this. And I'm relaxed and I'm pushing on the back of the tool. All the muscle comes from this forward. It's your wrist that's strongest, not your grip. And this, I'm only guiding the tool. I'm letting it do the work. I'm not holding it, okay? That's where people run into problems. That's why they think they can go slow. Tools like rippers cut the channel to relieve the stone, to give it somewhere to break to. Does the same thing that a diamond saw does, okay? Except this probably is a lot more cost effective. It's not quite as fast, but if you're going to save some money, if you got a budget, and you already got a hand machine, a good compressor, you know, these will do a lot, and these will reach where a diamond saw won't. That's why you have them. They generally have a taper. They have a reducing. They reduce as they go through. This is wide. The widest point should be at the top, so you don't have a draft. This one doesn't have much taper, and so it doesn't go very deep before it starts dragging. But you can see it's been spray painted. The paint's still on it, okay? Paint's still on it. So it ain't dragging on a stone wall right now. It can get confusing on this stone because we've got to keep track of our depths and our elevations and where things are and where things aren't and how tall or how short or whatever it is. Remember, we're going to do her an inch raised, okay? But that inch raise has to do with the plinth, okay? Because we're going to cut the plinth back an inch because we've got to compensate for all those fractures that were along the joint, and this is the most economical way for us to do it. So she's gonna, you know, almost look like she's off balance coming out of the stone. This still has to go back another at least an inch right here. This has to go back a lot. Very tempting, very, very tempting to get out the big drill and just drill a whole series of holes to open this up. I could do that, but I would rather not. There's some stones, some jobs, like if you've got a lot of room that you know is free and clear, oh yeah, drill away, baby, drill, baby, drill, whatever that guy says. But otherwise, it's not a smart thing to do. If you drill into this, you're surrendering volume, okay? And just like, remember we were talking about how you got multiple figures and you got agreement and all this other stuff, how you carve it so that they look like they like each other and they're not like fighting each other to get away, okay? But the same thing with this. I would rather produce this significant depth as I carve the job. Okay, I can stay ahead of it to a certain point. You don't have room to work, which is, you really need room to work. But if I hog out a whole bunch of stone, later on I may wish I still had that stone. So I would rather not go completely crazy. I'll get pretty close. I'll probably take it down just about, because we've got to go about an inch. Let's see. We go, measure just to get an idea. Yeah, so we gotta go 1.5 inches, roughly, just ballpark. And I'll probably go down another inch, and then I'll quit. Her shoulder's up here. We shot this point and this point, which are on the front of her shoulder. They're up in this area and right here. We shot these 2 points, so we've got those for reference. We know what that does. This all has to come off, but I'm going to develop all that. We don't want to commit this arm. This is where I try to tell you to do things in order and learn to be patient. Learn to wait for that reward or the cherry on top. Don't go after it right at the beginning, because you'll do things and then you'll wish you hadn't, because now you can't go back. It would really look nice to go ahead and put this shoulder together, make it look all pretty. You see her shoulder there. Oh, she's trapped in the stone. We gotta release her. We gotta save her. Save the princess. Okay, slow down. This entire shoulder, forearm, wrist posture has to be subsequent to her head. We have to put her head on there. We'll point that on. We want that right. We'll do the head, and we'll point the hands. Okay? Because the hands is over her heart, or above her heart, or when it's over here just above her, on top of her breast. We want this hand to be golden. And it's in here, around this area, right in here. Okay? I'm not 1,000% positive exactly where it is. This head, 8 inches. This is the next 8 inches. The point machine will go on and it'll put all this together. The head, this, the depth, everything. We'll do all that. And then, while we're there, we'll start pointing this hand. And we probably will point some high areas of the hand just to figure it out. Just to make sure where it is. And then we can articulate that anatomy. The hand, the wrist, the forearm, the elbow, the shoulder, the upper arm, everything. That is all downstream of carving that hand. And then that hand will match the arm will match the shoulder, and there'll be no visual noise. She won't have some hand that looks like somebody took in, she's been fighting in the MMA ring and they broke her arm 4 times and now it doesn't work right. We don't want some cockeyed, crooked arm. Just as much as we want this arm to be spot on the money, perfect length, this outboard left arm, this place in the flower. We want this hand to be exactly where it needs to be, and we want the rest of this to support it. Now, the only thing we've got to work around that we've committed to is that we did this nipple and this nipple to set the point machine on. And so but on the model, this is almost an inch above the arm on the model. And so on the job, it's an inch. We raised it, enlarged it, by a factor of a third, by 30%. Went from, 4 to 6. This is going to be almost 1.5 inches. Her forearm should be down here. But we've got 1.5 inches of room to play with it, just in case, so that we nail this arm, so we nail the shoulder, so all this looks perfect, okay? So don't get ahead of yourself. We'll carve this so her shoulder looks great. This upper arm looks great in relationship to the feathers. The feathers, the wings gotta go up here and all this other stuff. We'll deal with all that. We're gonna just get this evacuated some now. And then we'll keep digging this out because we're already down lower here. We're already in quite a bit. So we'll just get this to match like it does on the plaster. And we'll start working more on her lower body because that doesn't have anything to do with her head. directly, you know, it's gotta work, but this isn't gonna be matched. Okay, we'll make all this look great, make this look great. And because we're in charge, even if we have to adjust where these points are, we can, okay? This is the wonderful thing about being smarter than the stone or the plaster or whatever. We can do things that they can't. And so if we need to make a little adjustment, we can, all right? Like I said, can't fake a straight line, a square corner, or an edge. Can't fake that. Flat surface, you pretty well can figure that out. It's either right or wrong. But we can tweak this a little bit so that it works. And the big goal, the ultimate goal, is for this to be beautiful, okay? So don't get too hung up on absolutes. If you need to make a little amendment, especially if you're doing your own work and it's just art, it isn't a commissioned job that's quoted to be within exact specifications, you know, you can do a lot of stuff, okay? Back to cut. Okay, this is rough-in work, okay? That means that we want this tool, the chisel, I just sharpened my chisel. I want it to be very, very blunt. I want a lot of support for this skinny edge. I don't want it to be flat, but I don't want it to be skinny like when we're axing, okay? When we're axing that stone, I want it to be really skinny. I want this to be steep and stiff so I can really just lay into it, because if you make that thin, that's going to fracture and fracture and fracture, and your tool's just going to be junk, okay? So when you're doing this rough out work, and as you take and use your ripper to produce a channel, you'll find that if you can make the channel nice and long and straight, like, you know, I'm not trying to follow the curve of her arm exactly. I'm outboard of it. I can go up and down and up and down, and I've got a really nice track where I can just go back and forth and back and forth and just erode that deeper, and then strip it off a bunch with my nice sharp chisel. And you can see, I guess, the brazen material is all pounded up and buggered up. And that's important to have it on there so you take that abuse, because that's supporting that carbide, okay? This is what would be there if we slotted the chisel instead, but we're saving this, so we use that, and that's sacrificial. It's all it is. All that brazen rod you buy, everything, you're gonna throw it away. You're just buying it, you spend a little more money on it, brazen it together, and you're gonna throw it away. That's all you're doing. It's sacrificial. You know, that's part of your cost of doing business. Make a nice long rip, nice steep chisel. Use your big machine, lean into it, and you can just take all this off. We'll get this back fairly close to where I want to go and then leave it. I'll get back into this area, you know, so it's about the same elevation, and we'll just leave it. A lot of this seems really deceptive when you start looking at the model, you start looking at the stone, and you say, well, this should be bigger, this should be smaller, this should be over there. No, don't, okay? Trust your model, trust your work. You may get screwed up, and you may be doing it wrong, but you need to learn to trust your model. And then if you just go in there and start doing random stuff, you won't necessarily know where things went off track, okay? And I know that's hard to say, but if you just start going, it's like somebody working on a car, and they say, well, I wasn't running right, so I pulled this off, and I pulled that off, and I pulled all these parts off, and now I got all this stuff on the workbench, and I'm studying it to see what's wrong with the car. No, you fix one thing at a time to make sure it either works or it doesn't work. We don't want to lose control of the stone. These feathers, the wing looks like it's too close to her body. But we got to remember, right now her body's too big, okay? You got all this visual noise where her body is way not where it's supposed to be. There's all these things that don't match what we see over there. There's no congruity. It doesn't look right. And where this is a very accurately, well, as accurate as I could make it, a corrected model, me looking from here to there is almost like having perfect, you know, single point perspective, because it's reducing. This big one, you know, between this point and this point, they'd go through 2 points on this model and right to a horizon line, and it should be perfect. It should look just right, and it's really deceptive. When you're doing a weird numerical calculation, like you're enlarging her, and say she was, that model was some odd number, it wasn't just 2/3. There was some real weird ratio, like she was, 3 foot 1 inches high, or 3 foot 8 inches high, because that's not 3.5, and it's not 4, and, say she was only 3.8, and we're enlarging her to 6. It is quite a factor of 2. It's a weird, and so it may not look as ideal. This is balanced. It works really well, and so you got to trust it and just work with what you know, and don't go off the track. Getting a lot hogged off here. This is good, and then we'll be able to clean this up and have this look really well. And as she comes together and her hips narrow, it'll make her come forward. As this narrows, it'll make her stand out, and it'll be cool. But I'm just going to keep working this back and try not to get too close to this. I just want to get down to this level. And as these feathers come together, and they probably will shrink, all of a sudden we'll find that extra room for these other feathers. Okay, and so you gotta really be careful. We can take our caliper and do a rough eyeball on the width of the feather and the width of the feather. See, put it on there. If we take half of that, if this is 2/3 of the final model, if we take half of that and add it, that's almost exactly right. And so you can check it all you want, but you got to trust your model, okay, and your process. Sharpen your tools blunt for heavy work, and they'll last long. Just a little bit of the detail, how we put this in, running it down with a ripper, and see, we went from where this line is, we went down and did all that. It makes a pretty nice channel. And it gives you something to break to. You can really lay into it. You'll find taking a regular chisel and make it into a ripper gives you the same ability, in other situations. But I think handing this up, I think we're close to the end of the day. One of the reasons you keep your rake is to get your dirt floor. A lot of times it'll help you find your pencil. If I had my pencil and I set it down, I don't know where it went. It was here earlier, and I found it on the table. I don't know. I set it somewhere, but I'll have to keep looking for it. I had to get another pencil. So if you're smart, you'll have more than one pencil in your studio at a time, because if you only got one red pencil or one crayon, yeah, you're gonna lose it. But make a plan and stick to it. When I tell you to trust the method, trust the process, learn the process, and stick to it. And I know I want to get right into the fancy, pretty, fun part of carving too. But, I talked to you earlier about finding fulfillment as you cut, as you do the work, and you're axing a panel, you're bored out of your brain. You're just axing, and you scrape it and you scrape it and you scrape it, and it rocks and it rocks and it still rocks, still got a little bit of light, blam, and all of a sudden it's done. Ooh, man, cool. It's perfectly flat. When you put it on there, and it's a different sound when it makes a full engagement, when the register is all the way across versus just hitting in one spot. It sounds different and it feels different, and it's really cool. You'll learn. And you won't have to dwell on it, because as soon as you touch it, you'll be like, oh wow, yeah, that's a great fit. And that's your success. And you've got to be satisfied by things like that if you're going to do this work, you know, more than just a hobby, because there's a long time between, you know, finishing projects if you start doing big stuff or complicated stuff. I mean, you know, I worked on that base, and 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 I did stuff I didn't quote on that base because it's got to be done, you know, and then I finished it and it's done. And it's, you've got to be able to accept that something is done just as much as you've got to be able to accept something isn't done yet. And you know, it's the I like to go back to, you know, you got to quit combing your hair at some point because it's not going to get any better. And I know my hair is all cut short, but you know, at some point, you know, my artistic prowess, it only goes so far. And so I look at old work and I understand that, and you've got to accept that. If you're, and when I say you're just doing art, I want to clarify that. That isn't some kind of a slight or diss or throwing shade or whatever they talk about nowadays. I don't know. It sounds weird to me. It isn't some kind of put down. When I say you're just doing art, when I'm just doing art, I can make anything I want, and I don't have to justify it to anybody. I don't have to listen to a customer, a patron, a retailer say, I don't like that, I want you to change it. No, buddy, this is my art. I made it. This is me, man. I can do anything I want. I don't have to tell you anything. I don't have to ask your permission or get your approval or nothing. You know, it may never sell, but it's what, you know, I saw in the stone and what I recognize. And so there's a different, different situation there than when you're doing it for somebody else and they're picking and choosing and they can determine whether you succeed or whether you fail. And so you've got to try to achieve that. And I find a lot of gratification in trying to achieve what somebody else sees as art. Because to me, when somebody says, I want this, and they can only convey me a vague idea of what they want, because otherwise they'd do it. You know, most of these people, you know, there's a lot of people that call me up, I'm sure, if they have the capacity to do what I do for them, they do it themselves. They don't. You know, I know every retailer out there, you know, all these other companies that call me, you know, if they didn't need to call me, if they could keep the money in-house and everything in-house, they'd do it. So don't be offended if I say when it's just art, because art just means you can do what you want versus doing what somebody else wants. So, but anyways, we'll wrap this video up, and appreciate y'all hanging in there. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with a Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.